Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Last week, I had the honor of sitting down with the Deputy Director of the CIA, Michael Ellis. This was such an exciting experience because we were included in the new media that got the firsthand information from the top members of the administration. We got to actually go to DC and sit down with them. It was kind of like a celebration of the first 100 days, but the deputy director also shared insight into some of the new ways that the CIA is working. And I say that because they've been given the ability to kind of change up how things were going in the Biden administration and do things differently under the Trump administration. We also talk about some of the changes like the cartels being designated as terrorist organizations, because once you designate them that way, the CIA can change how they work things. And that can also affect so many other areas that we're focused on and that the Trump administration is focused on, like the fentanyl crisis, the fentanyl coming in from China, how you go after China for some of the things they're doing, and a whole lot more. But before we get into that interview with the Deputy Director of the CIA, first, let me talk to you about my partners at Preborn. When a mother with an unplanned pregnancy is deciding about the future of her unborn child, it's overwhelming. She wants to make the right choice, but society and those around her are telling her that her baby's just not a life. Preborn's whole ministry is to love these women and to empower them with the choice of life. And it's an eternal moment for these women. But I want to share one woman's story with you. It's Stephanie. Stephanie was scared and afraid, and she felt like she didn't deserve love and support. But after receiving so much love and support from a caring clinic, she experienced her eternal moment when she met her child on an ultrasound. She left the clinic that day feeling hopeful, and now she is so blessed by her 5-year-old son. It was a life saved. So when you support the Ministry of Preborn, you are supporting pro-life clinics nationwide with free ultrasounds to help empower a mom to choose life. Your tax-deductible donation of $28 monthly is reaching eternity. To get involved, simply dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby, or visit preborn.com/tutor. That's preborn.com/tutor. And this interview is sponsored by Preborn. Stay tuned because I've got Michael Ellis coming right up. We are in the executive office building here at the White House, and we have the Deputy Director of the CIA with us, Michael Ellis. Michael, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here with you today.
Absolutely. This is actually I'm totally geeked out about this. So I'm trying to be cool, but I'm actually really excited. But I'm really excited because of everything that you guys are doing.
Yes.
There's a couple of different things I want to hit on today because I know that you have a counterterrorism unit, and you've talked a little bit about what you're doing with the cartels and how they've been designated as terrorist organizations now. You've also said that that goes beyond the border. So can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you again for having me here today. It is an honor to serve in President Trump's administration as the Deputy Director of the CIA, working as part of a great team with Director Ratcliffe and the other members of the security team for President Trump. You know, on the counterterrorism front, one great win from the first 100 days that I wanted to highlight is we brought back Jafar. This is the guy who was one of the Abbey Gate plotters who organized an attack that killed 13 American service members. That, working with interagency counterparts, we found him, tracked him down, helped extradite him to the United States, where he's going to be facing charges to be held accountable. That was within the first 100 days. I think it was in late February, in the early days of the administration. CIA has been working on finding these kind of terrorist targets for years, right? I mean, it takes an enormous amount of effort to try to track down these terrorists to where they are, and again to bring them to justice, to hold them accountable. So that was one great win from the first 100 days. But you mentioned, on the counter-narcotics front, one of the President Trump's priorities is the total elimination of the cartels, and that is what we are going to do with CIA. We're obviously part of a whole of government effort. We aren't the only agency in this fight, but for too long, I think the intelligence community viewed the counter-narcotics fight as really more of a law enforcement problem. We sort of viewed it like, well, that's for FBI, it's for DHS. It's not really something that we do. We're worried about China and Russia and Al Qaeda, and we have to worry about all of those bad actors too. But the cartels, they are killing Americans every day, right?
Yeah.
Tens of thousands of Americans dying from fentanyl coming into the United States. And that is, something we can't ignore, right? It's the numbers are astounding. And so that's an area that Director Ratcliffe and I have prioritized. We're shifting resources, we're shifting personnel. But really, we're taking some of the lessons learned from that counterterrorism fight to destroy the cartels, because it's the same, obviously different motivations, different structures. But at the end of the day, we're talking about dismantling a network. And that is something that CIA has spent 2 decades of the war on terror learning how to do.
How does the new designation as terrorist organizations change your ability to go after them? What is the to the random person? Tell us what exactly that means.
Yeah. Well, I can't get into too many specifics about how that affects the work we do, but I will say it is helpful, right? Recognizing these groups, and they are foreign terrorist organizations. The president has designated them as such, and that does unlock some additional legal authorities in a variety of realms that make it easier for CIA and other parts of the U.S. government to take on this threat. But again, we've built a finely tuned machine at CIA over the past 20 years, since more than that, since 9/11, to find, fix, and finish terrorist targets. And now we're going to be taking that machine, turning to the cartels. It might mean that we have to have a few more Spanish speakers, and maybe the Arabic speakers might have to learn Spanish too, right? As we turn to this problem set, but it's too important. It's right in our backyard, and we can't afford to ignore it for any longer.
Well, I think that's how we have all felt. I mean, we walked in today and we saw all the pictures of the people on the front lawn, all of the folks that have been arrested. And it's interesting because I saw someone post today, what kind of sick organization looks at this and says, I want to put these people's pictures and put them in the lawn. And I'm like, this is lost on the radical left. It is lost on the left that these people have come into our country and committed horrendous crimes. And the reason, I believe, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, the reason for putting these out there so people can actually see this person committed this crime and was taken out of this country is so people can say there really truly were bad guys here.
Yeah.
And we're really doing something.
Yeah. No, and it crystallizes it, right? You can look at the statistics, you can look at the data, and that's meaningful, obviously, but data can be sterile and impersonal, right? Like putting the faces on it and the faces of the victims as well, right? Like remembering like the harm that has been caused by the failure to secure our border. It really brings it home to people. So look, CIA obviously has international focus, right? We don't have a domestic security function, but just like terrorism, the narcotics threat is one that originates overseas, right? It starts with precursor chemicals in China, coming into Mexico and other countries in Latin America, being synthesized into deadly drugs like fentanyl, and then being smuggled across our border, right? So there's a domestic component to that, right? We need our domestic law enforcement agencies to help on the domestic side. There's also a foreign component, and that's where CIA and the rest of the intelligence community can help with the fight.
What is this may sound like a stupid question, but what is the purpose of it? Is it for them to make money? Is it to hurt Americans? Is this terrorism?
It's and that's one of the areas where I think, again, it is a little different than the traditional terrorist threat because the motivations are different. It's primarily financial, because if it before fentanyl, there was cocaine. I mean, there still is cocaine. That's still a problem too. Don't get me wrong, right? But that was more predominant. Like which drug it is varied over time based on what's going to make them the most money. But for too long, again, these cartels have prospered from the an atmosphere where they could operate in relative impunity. So we're working with with partner governments in the area too. The Mexicans, they don't want these cartels running their country. They don't want the violence, the corruption it brings.
I'd like to change gears for a minute and talk about Israel. It's now the month of May, and 80 years ago, this very month, the horror of the Holocaust, the final solution, came to an end. But do you know that half of all Holocaust survivors live in Israel? The pain of the past now intensified today by October 7th and the rise of anti-Semitism everywhere. And along with other elderly Jews, thousands in Israel live below the poverty line. There's no safety net there. That's why I support the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. The fellowship provides a lifeline to these precious ones in the form of hot meals and boxes full of healthy food. And for only $25, you can help provide a food box. And better yet, for $335, it provides hot meals for an entire year. To give generously, call 888-488-IFCJ. Again, that's 888-488-4325. Or go online to give at ifcj.org. That's ifcj.org.
I joke about it because it's so ridiculous that we had to have it because so many of us knew, and it was almost punishable if you said that you thought it was a lab leak. So we are so grateful to you for what you do to come out and say, this is the truth.
I mean, and that's what the president deserves, right? The president deserves intelligence assessment. The American people, they deserve intelligence assessments that are supported by the facts on the ground, right? I mean, no politics, no bias in it, just the most accurate assessment to inform the president's foreign policy decisions. On China more broadly, though, as well, I think a tremendous amount of credit is due to President Trump for recognizing the threat that China poses to the United States. And he recognized it before anyone else did in Washington. The national security strategy of the United States in Republican and Democratic administrations alike for decades said it was U.S. policy to enable the peaceful rise of China, right? That was our policy, to enable their rise. President Trump was the first one who came in 2017. It's like, that's not the policy anymore, right? China, in addition to the fentanyl precursor problem that we were discussing, right, that on trade issues, on intellectual property theft, on cybersecurity, on issue after issue, that they just hadn't been following the rules. And President Trump was the first one to stand up and really change the dynamic. And, for the CIA now, it's the top priority for us. This is an existential threat, and it's a technological competition that we're in with China, where whether it's AI or quantum computing or biotechnology, we have to prevail, right? We have to empower the American private sector, and we have to understand Chinese capabilities to be able to succeed in that competition.
I mean, I come from the manufacturing world, and
yes,
I would say that China really was what crushed our foundry and so many others in the United States. So I watched as our customers would take their products over to China, and then China would just copy them.
Well, and they never allowed U.S. companies the same access to the Chinese market that Chinese companies had to the U.S. market. And yes, you look at product after product that looks suspicious, where the Chinese version looks suspiciously similar to. Yeah, I mean, look at their fifth generation fighter jet, that looks an awful lot like the F-35, which again.
That's what people don't understand, that we've actually had military equipment made by our adversary, and they have been able to copy some of what we're doing, but they copy everything. And so Jack Dorsey just recently came out and he said he wants to get rid of IP laws and get rid of any laws on intellectual property. And I just think this is how naive people can be. This is what you've created. You own this. This is what you've built. And you could have anybody in the United States, but certainly foreign actors, it's very dangerous to have them get a hold of our intellectual property.
Yeah. And part of the problem, again, historically, was that there wasn't any deterrence. There wasn't any cost on foreign adversaries who engaged in this kind of intellectual property theft, right? Chinese hackers would penetrate, whether it's a U.S. company or government agency. And there were sanctions or name shaming and criminal indictments, but those are ultimately toothless because the Chinese hackers never showed up in the U.S., so we never arrested them, and they operated after the U.S. financial system, so sanctions weren't particularly meaningful. And that's an area where President Trump again has started to make a difference in his first administration, and where CIA and other parts of the government can play a role in the second administration to start restoring deterrence, right? And sometimes that means that we have to engage in offensive operations ourselves to be able to create, again, a cost to China and other bad actors on cybersecurity to make them realize that they can't act with impunity. If they engage in bad behavior, there will be a price for it.
Do you think that is our biggest threat today, is China? I mean, we see them in anywhere from globally in our they're building new naval ports across the globe. We even see them in space. So what is is China our biggest threat?
Yeah, I mean, they are the great power competitor right now, right? Whether it's, as you mentioned, the military or the political front, but in the economic front that we were just talking about. Obviously, there are other threats out there: Russia, Iran, North Korea. We worry about all of them too. ISIS and Al Qaeda. We can't take our eye off the ball on any of them. But at the end of the day, none of them have the capability that China has. None of them pose an existential threat to America in the way that China does. When Director Ratcliffe and I, when we, lay out our priorities inside of CIA and turn our great people towards taking on these threats on behalf of the president, it's China and technology, because I think, again, the competition with China is a technological competition in a way that our competition with the Soviet Union during the Cold War really wasn't. And it's the cartels, because, again, that's that scourge of deadly drugs that's killing Americans, that's in our backyard. So we have to put that in order before we can get that everything else.
Before I let you go, I want to ask, coming into the CIA after the Biden administration, what have you seen that you talked about getting the guy from the Abbey Gate.
Yes.
Why did that take so long? Has the CIA changed since the Biden administration?
We changed the priorities. And, another area where Director Ratcliffe and I have really, changed things is just on focusing on mission, right? The CIA, like many other parts of society and many other parts of the government, I think was distracted by the DEI agenda. It's things that really took away from our ability to carry out the mission on behalf of the American people. So, we want an ultimate meritocracy at CIA. We want an elite workforce. This mission is important, right? There's no time for these distractions or bias. No, that's not what we should be doing, right? So we're putting the focus squarely back on the mission, the social and cultural issues. People can do that in their own time. They shouldn't be doing it at work.
Yes. Well, I think that the majority of Americans agree, and that's why President Trump came in with a mandate. We appreciate what you're doing there. And I think the first 100 days has been phenomenal. We're excited to see what else you do, but congratulations on what you've done so far.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you all for joining me on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. For this episode and others, go to TudorDixonPodcast.com. You can subscribe right there, or head over to the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. Have a blessed day.